Hi, I'm Brian Walker, and I'll be your narrator for today's live Q&A on Trump-era immigration policy changes, brought to you by Global Talent Immigration Law Group. This event is dedicated entirely to answering your immigration questions, both the ones submitted in advance and those coming in live from the audience. If you're applying for an O1 or EB1 visa, or simply trying to understand how recent executive actions may affect your case, you're in the right place. Policy is shifting, and clarity is more important than ever. Helping guide today's session is Tiffany Gomez, Chief Operating Officer at Global Talent Immigration Law Group. Tiffany will be presenting your pre-submitted questions and pulling new ones live from the chat throughout the stream. And answering them all is Liz Profumo, Managing Attorney and one of the nation's top experts in high-skill immigration. Liz has years of experience helping founders, researchers, and extraordinary ability professionals succeed on their journey through the U.S. immigration system. Thanks for joining us. Let's get started.
Hello and welcome. I'm Tiffany Gomez, Chief Operating Officer here at Global Talent Immigration Law Group. I'm joined today by our Managing Attorney, Liz Profumo. We appreciate you taking the time to join us as we dive into your most pressing questions about recent changes and proposed changes to immigration policies under the Trump administration. We received several questions in advance, which we'll address during this session. If you have any additional questions as we go along, please feel free to drop them in the chat, and we'll do our best to get to them as well. Let's begin with the first question. So it comes from Rand of Los Angeles, and he asks, will the O1 visa process become harder and harder? Will new policies affect people approved for EB1, but still waiting for the priority date to become current?
Okay. Thanks for your question, Ron. And by the way, thank you everybody for joining us for this discussion this morning. Okay, so Rand had two distinct questions. The first one being, will the O1s get harder as time goes on? And of course, we don't have any way to predict that with any certainty, but we've noticed that they've stayed largely the same in terms of adjudication. We are noticing more requests for evidence in the premium processing units. Excuse me, everybody. So, look, we're going to hope that we don't see any more scrutiny than we're seeing now, which, as I mentioned, is slightly, we're seeing some more RFEs, but the approval rate so far has remained similar from what we've seen, over the past several months. And then the second question that you had about, will the new policies affect someone who's waiting for their priority date? And for anyone who isn't clear what exactly that means, the EB1 green card has two distinct parts to it. The first part is the I-140 that establishes your extraordinary ability. And then in the second part, they're verifying your identity and checking your criminal history. So, and citizens of certain countries, and notably India and China, are not eligible to file the second part immediately. There's a queue, and you get in a queue based on your priority date. So, Ran, if your I-140 is already approved, it will not be reopened and readjudicated using any different set of standards. Once your I-140 is approved, that part is done. Now, when it comes time to file the second part, if they are using additional scrutiny for national security purposes, then the second part could be subject to that higher level of scrutiny. but your I-140, if it's already approved, it's done. So you don't have to worry about the new policies affecting anything that's already approved, only things that will be filed and will be adjudicated in the future.
Okay, thank you, Liz. The second question is from Mads of Copenhagen. Is there any changes to the process of applying for an O1 visa this year compared to last year?
So in terms of the process is the same. So for anyone who's outside the US, it's a two-step process. First we file a petition with the USCIS, and then after that petition is approved, there has to be an interview at a US embassy or consulate outside the US. So the process is identical. So but kind of the bigger question is either US Immigration or the State Department going to make either of these two steps more difficult? And so, like I said, we're seeing some additional requests for evidence on O1s. So it's possible USCIS may be making the standard a bit harder. And a lot of the national security and screening announcements we've all been hearing, could potentially make consular interviews more difficult. I don't know that we're seeing a ton of that at this moment for O1s, but that is a possibility.
The next question is from Raya of Los Angeles. Are there changes in the standard processing time or any sort of delays that you've observed or expect this year?
Really good question. Yeah. So we certainly have been expecting delays because under the last Trump administration, we certainly did see longer processing times. So a couple months ago, the O1 processing times, USCIS publishes the processing times of all the various cases, and the O1 processing times really the published times became very long, ranging anywhere from 7.5 to 10 months. In reality, what we're seeing is most O1 cases are adjudicated within anywhere from 2 to 5 months. That's not a guarantee that all cases are. There are a handful of cases that take longer, but the majority of cases will come through within that time frame, which is actually comparable to what they were, prior to this administration. Maybe so they might be a little bit longer now, but they're not most cases are not the published processing time of 7.5 to 10 months.
Very true. Okay, the next one is from Tina from Boston. When entering the U.S., what should F1 students do if they are sent to secondary inspection and social media screening? Another great question.
Yes, and we're getting this question a lot, so I'm really glad you asked this, Tina. Okay, and again, there's kind of two different issues here. So because secondary inspection and device screening are not necessarily one and the same. So anyone who, a lot of people have been surprised to learn that that Customs and Border Protection can search your devices, can search your phone, your iPads, your laptops. And I think the reason is because it's been in the news and the searches have, brought up some information that has made the national news. Actually, searching devices is not something new. This is something CBP has always done and has always had the authority to do. And the first question everyone asks me is, do they have the right to do this? And so the answer is yes. They're doing it, their stated purpose for searching your devices is in the interest of national security. And so they have a lot of latitude to do whatever they feel they need to do for that purpose. So anyone who you do have the right to refuse to have your device searched. However, in that case, you very well may expect to not be admitted to the United States. Okay, so if they're searching your device, generally, if they ask for passwords, if you want to come in, you would plan to give them to them. Of course, if there's anything on your devices that could be of concern, you would want to consider that prior to your travel and try to make sure there is nothing concerning on your phone, on your laptop, iPads, also your social media. I do also want to emphasize that most people's devices are not searched. This is the rare few, the vast majority of travelers will not have their devices searched. Okay, so it's not routine. Now, secondary inspection is, it's a separate unit when you're entering. If the Customs and Border Protection officers have additional questions about the purpose of your trip, your identity, your travel history, any number of things, they can put you in secondary inspection to ask more questions, to verify more information. So if a student particularly is put into secondary inspection, I think it's important to, have your I-20 with you that shows that you are enrolled in school, be able to answer the basic questions about what school you're attending, what kind of course of study you're taking, your intention to, in fact, study and not work if you're not authorized to work with your student visa. And, you just need to make sure that you're clear that the purpose of your visit is in line with your F1. Okay, so I hope I answered that question.
I see there is a chat in here about F1, if we'll be answering any questions about F1s.
Sure. I mean, to the best of our ability,
Okay.
certainly.
So Nick, if you want to ask the question, we'll make sure to get to it before the stream is over. All right, the next question is from Lorna. She asked, what will happen to an international student who is already admitted and the course commences in fall?
Mm-hmm. So we'll hope that the answer to that, Lorna, is nothing. We hope that if you're here and you've already gotten your visa, you've already gotten into the country, that everything will just continue to go on as usual. This is the first time things that have happened in the past several weeks are the first time in my career in almost 20 years that we've seen students have problems en masse in terms of visa revocations and cancellations. So the students who have had problems up until this point are students who have been flagged for attending protests that are in support of Palestine, as well as students, excuse me, I'm so sorry, as well as students who have a criminal history. And when I say criminal history, I basically mean anything that they have been, where they've encountered law enforcement and been fingerprinted, even if it's for something as mundane as a traffic stop, running a stop sign, just very minor infractions. So a lot of students had their visas canceled for this criminal history. But then within a couple weeks, those visas were reinstated. Again, we've never seen anything like this, so it's a little bit uncertain how that might impact students in the future. But I think the majority of students who are here, especially that don't have an arrest record, will be fine.
Okay, so I was going to wait until we got to the end to answer some of these questions, but a lot are coming through.
Mm-hmm.
So I see from Nick, we have students who managed to obtain their F1 student visa. Others are unable to schedule their interview. Is there information with regards to this?
Oh, what a good question.
It's a great question.
Yeah, so I think it was just last week that an announcement was made by the State Department that they are suspending all student visa interviews until such time as they can put in a protocol to screen potential students or student visa applicants for national security concerns in a more effective way. They haven't indicated how long this is going to take. Personally, I thought the fact that they did this now when schools are kind of letting out for the summer, I was hoping that this indicated that they plan to resolve it before the majority of students come back in the fall. But Nick, I don't know how long it's going to take them to put in these national security protocols, but there is a hiatus on the issue of issuance of student visas at this moment.
Okay. So I'll do one more. There is a question from Yalan. Could you please walk us through the current time frame for EB1 applications under Trump, especially for citizens from India and China? Like how long to get a response for I-14 priority date, et cetera?
Okay, so Yalan, thank you for your question. I previously mentioned the EB1 green card has the two parts, I-140, and then the adjustment of status or a DS-260. So for the I-140, once it's filed with USCIS, it is, and there's no limitation on when we can file it. We can file it anytime, whenever it's ready. And if it's approved, then your priority date becomes the date it was filed, okay, no matter what country you're from. So most applicants are opting for premium processing, which means that I-140, you will either get an approval or request for additional evidence within 3 weeks or 15 calendar days. If you don't use premium processing, you would hope to have the approval or request for additional evidence within about 9 months, though, that can vary. Now, the second part, it's the ones that are getting filed now, we're seeing them come through, I'm going to say around 9-ish months, give or take. If you're someone where your priority date's not current and you're not going to be eligible to file your adjustment of status for 2 or 3 more years, I can't tell you how long it's going to take at that time, but 9 months has been a pretty consistent estimate. Some come through sooner, some take a little longer. Okay, so I hope that answers the question.
Okay, so I'll go back to the other questions. Tali, how can we prepare for visa resubmissions or green card? What can we do in advance to make it a smoother process?
Okay, so in terms of the resubmission, I think what Tali is referring to is the process of renewing or extending your O1. So if that's the case, then in order to renew it, you'll have to show that you have continued to work in your field since your last one was approved, and also that you have work lined up for the next bit of time that you're asking for. So O1s can be issued or renewed for 3-year segments. So if you want to renew it for 3 more years, you want to show that you have work lined up in your field or offers to work in your field lined up for that next 3 years. In terms of what you can do to make it a smoother process, I think you can just, knowing that you are renewing these visas or working towards an EB1 green card, anytime you might have the opportunity to do any press, any promotion, anything that will, get your name in any of the trade publications related to your work, take that opportunity. Keep in mind where we might ask to see your contracts or, any other proof of your work. So just, maybe save it in a file on your computer, knowing that we'll probably ask for it when we go to renew.
You mentioned press, and we're noticing more and more how important press is, especially now with requests for evidence to have for your case. So if you can get press, it's really important to get it and save it. And so when you go for a renewal, to make sure you provide it, because it is something that we're seeing we need to include more and more of.
Absolutely. I mean, the hallmark of an O1 has always been having some kind of public profile within your field. Mm-hmm. And I really think that immigration is looking to the press to show that you have that public profile they like to see.
So the next question is from Jose from Los Angeles. Is it predicted that there will be changes to premium processing with the Trump administration? It's a great question.
It is, because, until I actually saw this question, I had blocked out the fact that under the last Trump administration, there were so many different changes. And actually, for those who don't remember, there was a time under Trump when they actually suspended premium processing completely. So there was no premium processing option, and everything just took as long as it took. And then when it came back, when they did start offering it again, they increased the fee. They almost doubled the premium processing fee. So I believe, I'm sorry if I don't remember the dates right on the increase, but I believe that under the last administration, it was increased to from like $14.40 to $2,500, and it's now up to $2,805. So are they going to increase it again? We don't know. So will it increase while this administration is in office? Yes, because I think yes, because filing fees normally do increase over time. Every couple years there's some increase. Will it be another, almost doubling of the amount? We certainly hope not. We haven't heard anything about that up until this point, but there's just no way to know. So up until now, they have not suspended anything. They haven't made any kinds of cases ineligible for premium processing. They haven't increased the fees yet, but obviously it's still kind of early on. So maybe you can check back with us on that as time goes on here.
There is a question here from Oliver. He says, "Hi, Liz. Transitioning from O1 to green card as an actor. Is having an agent as petitioner/sponsor enough? Also being on my second O1 visa, does that make the transition to a green card less difficult?"
Really, really good questions. So, Oliver, you mentioned the agent as employer. So that is something that is relevant in an O1 case, and you do need to have some kind of sponsorship, and that is one kind of sponsorship you can have for an O1 visa. For an EB1 green card, it doesn't require sponsorship, which is actually what makes it attractive to so many professionals from all kinds of professions around the world. You don't have to have a sponsor for an EB1. So does having O1s make getting an EB1 easier? It can potentially. That being said, it doesn't guarantee it. So being qualified for an O1 doesn't guarantee success with an EB1. To qualify for the EB1, the regulations require you to show that you're one of the small percentage working at the very top of your field. So if you're an actor, generally they're going to want to see you're kind of working on, commercially successful, which usually means big budget projects. A lot of times those are going to be tied to film studios, TV networks, not necessarily, if you are involved with, really successful independent projects. If you have a lead role, things like that, those are all factors that can be helpful for the EB1. But for an actor who's applying for an O1, you may be successful by showing you've had a big role in some short films that have gone to some festivals. And in general, that standard is not going to be high enough to meet the standard for EB1. So is it helpful? I think in some way it is, though. It's certainly not a guarantee that you'll get approved for EB1.
So Oliver had a part 2, and his part 2 was, or is that a part 3? Also, would you still need to provide proof of deal memos for an O1 visa transition to green card?
No. So if you're applying for an EB1 green card, you don't need specific deal memos, which is, by the way, that's, job offer letters. For an EB1 green card, you need to have some kind of documentation to show that you have the intention to continue working in your field, but they don't have to be as specific as the job offer letters that are included in O1s.
So I'm going to go back to the questions that were submitted beforehand. Okay. Julia of Los Angeles, are there trends in who is getting approved or asked for further information? And the second part is, are they looking at social media accounts for anti-Trump sentiments?
Oh, really? Okay, so I'm impressed with these are good questions, everybody. So in terms of who is getting approved, who's getting requests for evidence, so, almost all of our cases are still getting approved. What I'm noticing about the requests for evidence, and I think what Julie is asking is if it's, if people from certain countries or certain regions are being hassled. We're not necessarily seeing that. We're seeing most people get requests for additional evidence. It's really related to premium processing versus non-premium processing. So, Julia, I'm not seeing that citizens of any specific countries are having problems with approvals at this point. And I'm sorry, what was the second one?
The second part is, are they looking at social media
Yes,
accounts
are they
for
looking at social-
anti-Trump sentiments?
Okay, so I have not yet seen or heard of USCIS doing that when you actually submit your paperwork for the O1. However, they could look for this either at a consular interview at a US embassy when you're applying for a visa, or they could also look for this at the airport, when you're going through CBP, if they do search your devices and they find this kind of anti-Trump, which they consider to be anti-US government sentiment, yes, that can be an issue.
Okay, so we'll go to Andre from San Francisco. Are there any risk of international travels on an O1 visa?
Okay. Oh, you guys are getting me this morning. Okay, so any risk. So look, prior to this administration, there's never, ever a guarantee ever of being readmitted to the US, even with a visa. That being said, especially when you have an employment visa, you're fine. Normally people don't have problems. So, however, if you do get searched, if you're one of the few people that that does have your devices searched, and they do come across anti-government type materials, yes, you could have problems and be denied entry on that basis, I would say.
So I'll ask.
Excuse me again.
Javier asks, is there a difference when you apply for a renewal of an O1 visa when you are inside the US to when you are outside of the country? Okay.
So, I mentioned earlier, so if you're outside of the country, so if you're inside the country, there's one step. We file a petition, and we can either change your status to O1 while you're here, or if you already have an O1, we can extend it while you're here. So it's one filing, one process. If you're outside the US, then there's a second step. So after the first filing, the petition is approved, then you have to attend a consular interview. I mean, historically, the consular interviews don't pose much of a barrier to visa issuance. It's a short interview where they verify you're planning to do what you say you're going to do in your paperwork that's filed with USCIS. However, in this time of increased scrutiny and screening, and especially now that they're canceling the student interviews until they put in these, stricter security protocols, we're not sure if these consular interviews are going to become more onerous, more difficult, and actually result in more people being denied. So up until now, the difference between filing here and abroad is just having to attend this consular interview, which has not been a barrier for the vast, vast majority of applicants. But going forward, we'll have to see. Whether you're in the country or outside the country, it doesn't make a difference on how approvable you are. You can get approved at the same rate either way.
Okay, so we have a question from Juliet from New York. How long approximate does O1B visas take to be approved for both regular and premium?
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me. And then the second part to the question is, how do the new regulations affect chances of getting approved?
Okay, so the first question, processing times, most cases in regular processing, 2 to 5 months. These days, the way they're doing it, all O1 cases are filed to one location in Texas, and then Texas distributes them either to California or to Vermont, and it's at their discretion. So we're seeing most cases in Vermont approved in 2 to 3 months. California, more like 4 to 5 months in most cases. That's with regular. Premium processing, they have 15 business days, which is 3 weeks, three calendar weeks, to either approve a case or request more evidence.
Okay, let's see. Olivia from Pasadena asks, are there any new precautions for EB1 green card holders re-entering the country based on recent policy shifts and increased scrutiny at U.S. borders, such as preparing for phone check for social media, a signed G28 form, or carrying a legal package I used to present as an O1 visa holder?
So, yeses and nos. So anyone who's traveling to the U.S. in any status with a green card, as a visitor, as an O1, anyone who's traveling, devices are subject to search, and the problematic content can affect any traveler in the same way. Okay. So I would say that you should, even though most people's devices will not be searched, the safest way to travel is to make sure there's nothing in your devices that would cause a problem if they were searched. Now, I don't think, so that said, so I think you should do that. I think everyone should take those precautions. In terms of carrying paperwork, green card holders do not have to carry the paperwork that they used to get approved for their green card. No, you have to have your green card, but you don't have to carry G28s. You don't have to carry any of the documentation that served as the basis for you to get your green card.
Serena from Los Angeles asks, what are the risks of leaving the country for a visa interview? And can I still apply for an EB1 now? Okay.
So, Serena, the risks of leaving the country for a visa interview are, even though the vast majority of visas are approved at a U.S. embassy, the risk is that your visa could be denied and then you wouldn't be able to come back unless you already have some other kind of visa. So that's the risk. Up until now, the risk has been low. For anyone who's applying for the student visas going forward, we're going to have to see once they release the new protocols if it actually does, pose a more significant risk to visas being issued, and if it extends any further than student visas. And then can you still apply for the EB1? Is that the question?
Yes.
So generally, anyone can apply for the EB1 at any time. There's no restriction on when you're allowed to do that or where you are when you do it. So you can be in the US or outside the US when you apply for the first part of that EB1 green card. There are some strategic decisions that might be made around that. If you're applying for other types of temporary visas, you very well may want to do that first. But generally, anyone can apply for the EB1 anytime from anywhere.
So Wei Jen asks, hi Liz, will the process of applying permanent resident green card from conditional green card be more difficult under the Trump administration? I'm currently holding conditional green card through a 4-year marriage.
Yeah. What a good question. I wish I knew the answer to that. I mean, in general, look there. So they are, when the pandemic started, all the people who got green cards through marriage generally started getting them by mail instead of being required to attend in-person interviews. Okay, so, and that's something that was kind of new in immigration history. Historically, all couples are interviewed. Because of COVID, they stopped that. And then the Biden administration carried that process through of not requiring the interviews, because it's efficient. So now when you're going to remove the conditions from your residency, actually this process became ridiculously long under the last Trump administration and has stayed ridiculously long, meaning most cases I'm seeing 2 to 2.5 years processing time for the removal of conditions to be approved. Are they going to make it harder? Are they going to start calling in more couples for the removal of conditions? I don't know. I haven't heard about that yet. And I haven't had any of my clients called in for 751 interviews yet. So I don't know the answer to that. I don't know that there's any information available. We'll hope they're already taking 2.5 years to do it. So hopefully they won't make the process any more onerous, but I don't know. So I would just say anyone who has any concern, the hardest thing that they could do would be to call you in for an interview and give you a tough interview. So to the extent that you and your spouse are confident about being able to pass an interview, talking about your lives together, the place where you live together, that would be the best thing you could possibly do to, get ahead of any issues with the removal of conditions application.
Okay. I thought this question was really interesting, and it's from Leo. What do you think about AI potentially being used by USCIS or the government to gather online and social media data to assess eligibility? Where do you see this going? That was pretty interesting.
Leo. Yeah. So I think that it is likely in our not too distant future. So, and I'm, in terms of eligibility, I'm thinking that this is related to national security.
Mhm.
So, not eligibility or qualification for like any specific visa classifications. But I do think that this is something that is being used and, maybe a more rudimentary level already and will be, just improved, or it will become a lot more powerful as time goes on. So I think that anything that's posted, it could potentially end up in your immigration record and in your immigration file. When part of the increased screening for student visas, they're talking about keeping copies of posts, even if they're later deleted, in people's individual files. So, yeah, so I think that we all know that, once it's online, once it's out there forever. And I think that that's really going to come back to haunt a lot of people as AI gets more powerful. So certainly this administration would be interested in using that information against more people than any administration in the past in terms of immigration. So I don't know, obviously this administration will come to an end, and so how it will be used in the future, we'll just have to see. But Leo, I think it's already here actually, but I think it's coming in a more powerful way in the future.
All right. So Jay asks, so would you not recommend premium processing since it triggers an RFE? And that's interesting because we recently discussed this in the office.
We did. We were just having this conversation. And actually, for anyone who can, wait for the longer processing time, I will at this moment advise you to wait and avoid premium processing, because the increase in requests for evidence, when you look at the processing time in the two units, the number of RFEs coming out of premium processing is very significantly higher. And also when actually seeing that the processing times in most cases are not nearly what the published processing times are, I think it's better to wait for anyone who can wait.
Oh, this one is interesting.
Actually, though, let me just say one other thing. I'm saying that there is a significant increase for people who are filing in premium processing, but 75 to 80% of all of our cases filed in premium processing are still getting approved without a request for evidence. So even though it does increase the risk of a request for evidence, the vast majority of cases don't get them. So I don't want people to feel like, no one can use premium processing. That's not the case at all. But anyone who's a client of ours that's watching will kind of make that assessment on a case-by-case basis. Okay.
All right. So Mozart, I'm sorry for missing your question earlier, but I see you asked it again. It says, I'm Iranian. I wanted to start an O1 application. With the recent restrictions on Iranian citizens, is there any hope?
Okay. So you're touching on a brand new, topic. So just last night, a presidential proclamation was issued. It's a travel ban. So if for anyone who doesn't remember, in the last Trump administration, in one of the first weeks, a travel ban was implemented. And there's been speculation ever since he started campaigning for this term that the travel ban would be coming back. And so just yesterday, Mozart, they actually announced it. Actually, that's what my printout is here. So actually, I'm going to start by saying what the exceptions to the ban are, and then I'll say which countries have what restrictions.
Did you want me to read anything, or you got it?
I got it.
Okay.
Let's see. Okay, so even though this travel ban is in place, these are people who are not subject to it. One, any lawful permanent resident of the US. So if you have a green card, you are fine, even if you are from a country that is subject to the travel bans. Any dual national of a country. So, okay, so if you are a dual citizen of a banned country and a non-banned country, you're exempt. Okay. 3, so people traveling with diplomatic visas, including A visas, G visas, and NATO visas. The 4th exception is any athlete or member of an athletic team, including coaches or persons performing a necessary support role and immediate relatives traveling for the World Cup, Olympics, or other major sporting event as determined by the Secretary of State. This next one is a big carve out. Immediate family immigrant visas with clear and convincing evidence of identity and family relationship. Okay, so this means that even if you're from a country subject to the ban, if you're eligible for a visa based on being the spouse, child, or parent of a US citizen, they will still issue it if you can provide clear and convincing evidence of your identity and your family relationship. The next exception is for adoptions. Next is for Afghan special immigrant visas, for certain citizens of Afghanistan that assisted the US government. 8, special immigrant visas for US government employees. And 9 is immigrant visas for ethnic and religious minorities facing persecution in Iran. Okay, so if you fall into one of those groups, then the ban should not affect you. But so that doesn't answer Mozart's question yet. Okay, so full travel ban, which means no immigrant, no non-immigrant or immigrant visas of any kinds, except for the exceptions that I just read, from 12 countries: Afghanistan, Burma, Chad, Republic of the Congo, Equatorial Guinea, Eritrea, Haiti, Iran, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and Yemen. So people from those countries who are, not in one of the exceptions would not be expecting to get visas unless they can. There is, there is an exception. If you can show that your travel to the US is in the national interest, you can be given a waiver. Okay. Okay. So actually Iran is one of the 12 banned countries. So I'm sorry, but yeah, that's, they will not be issuing O1 visas to Iranian citizens unless you can show that your work is going to be in the national interest of the US, which we don't know what standard they're going to set to show that yet, because they just made this announcement last night.
Is that if they're already in the US or whether it's they're abroad or in the US?
So this clearly applies to people who are outside the US.
Okay.
For people who are in the US, it would not apply in the same way, because this is going to apply to the issuance of visas for people who are already here. It's going to be a different story. Okay, so even though we did cover Iran, we did answer that question, but let's talk about the rest of the banned countries. So there's a partial ban on visa issuance for citizens of 7 countries: Burundi, Cuba, Laos, Sierra Leone, Togo, Turkmenistan, and Venezuela. So for the countries that are partially banned, They will not be issuing visitor visas. They will not be issuing student visas. However, they will continue to issue employment visas. Yeah. So
I'm sure we'll have more maybe in our next newsletter as more comes out about it.
absolutely.
Right. I'll go to a question from Clive from the UK.
Hi, Clive.
If a visa, green card, or O1 has been approved but not yet issued, could it be reevaluated by USCIS and refused? And if so, how would this impact a work permit which has already been issued?
Right. Okay. So the first part, will they reopen it, readjudicate it, maybe deny it? No, that's not going to happen. So anyone with the approved I-140, that part's done. So I won't address the second part since it's, it would only be speculation and that's not happening at this point. So.
Cora from Taiwan. I plan to marry my American fiance in 2026, but I want to be able to live and work in the US as soon as possible. Is the O1 faster than the marriage visa? Which one is easier? And should I apply for an O1 this year or should I wait?
Okay, Corey, you need to just have a consultation just because there's a lot of information there.
It's free.
Okay, and congratulations on your engagement. So I will say that generally O1s or most non-immigrant visas will process faster than green cards. So generally an O1 will be faster. And then I forgot what the next one. What's the next one?
Sorry. Is the O1 faster than the marriage?
Yes.
Which one is easier?
Oh, so yeah, generally, okay. In terms of, I can't say that being married is harder or easier than not being married, but for paperwork, generally a marriage-based green card process is going to require less documentation and overall be less onerous than the very document-heavy O1.
Okay, and the last part is, should I apply for an O1 this year or wait?
Yeah, so I think we should talk about that individually. I will say in general, it's fine to apply for O1s this year. It's, they're still being approved. You shouldn't avoid an O1 just because of the politics.
So this one is interesting. I think it's from Christina. Is there a suggested time limit for international travels when you hold an O1? For example, if there's 6 months left on my O1, will I face difficulty entering the US?
Mm-hmm. So generally, there's no travel restrictions of any kind on O1, meaning that people with O1 can spend as much time or as little time working in the US as they would like. And I think it's fine to come back to the US with 6 months remaining on your visa. I don't like it when people are coming back to the US with 2 weeks or less on their visa, just because then you have to make sure that everything gets filed in a proper way, and you're going to have, a higher risk of having harder questioning if you're coming in, at the very end. But if you're coming back with 6 months left, that's fine.
So Florent from Fresno, how are O1 visa renewals affected by the new policies? Is it possible to ask for a green card if we're already a resident under the O1 visa?
Yeah. So O1s are, so there's not really, I don't know if it's right. I don't think there's any new actual policies impacting O1s. It's just more how the officers are looking at them. So I think it's fine to renew the O1s. We're not seeing, any decline in the approvability of O1 renewals. And so, yes, if you're here in the US and you have your O1, absolutely, you can move forward with that EB1 at any time. Legally, there's nothing preventing anyone from filing an EB1 at any time. It's really going to be based on, when you meet the requirements and when your work is of the caliber that will get you approved for that very high category.
Do you want to? There's two here.
Yeah. Okay.
Dr. Zama Dube. I'm South African based in LA on an F1 OPT and am wanting to convert to an O1. Mm-hmm. Will I have to leave the country to wait for processing? I'm both an artist and a scholar, So which is faster, O1 or O1A or O1B?
So processing time for both is the same.
Mhm.
Okay. So, and, we'll have to talk. So, okay. It is possible to change your status from F1 OPT to O1 within the US. Our process for working on O1s, usually from the time we start working together until the time it's filed, it's usually between 3 and 4 months, which includes 2 months of document collection for our clients to provide the documents we need to us. So, and then once it's with immigration, 2 to 5 months in regular processing or 3 weeks in premium processing with the, increased risk of request for evidence.
All right.
But I would say, please schedule a consultation to talk about whether O1A or O1B is going to be better for you.
Abdi asks, hi, would being a student applying for a visa from Tanzania be a hindrance given the new regulations?
Mhm. Well, so at the moment, right, there's the worldwide pause on the issuance of student visas, regardless of what country. And I didn't read anything about Tanzania, right? So, yeah, I'm not aware of, Tanzania having any more difficult restrictions than any other countries. It's certainly not on either of the banned lists.
So Jill asks, have we seen an increase in RFEs for O1s? But I feel like we've answered that one already.
So yeah, we have, we were comparing the number we've received this year with the number from last year, and keeping in mind our process is the same, the content of our cases is the same, and yeah, the amount of RFEs is double what we saw last year.
All right. Kat asks, if I already have an O1 visa being reviewed, a case that was submitted to the USCIS 3 months ago, will the changes affect how my case is reviewed, or is it just for new cases not yet submitted to USCIS? And lastly,
there's more. Okay.
Yeah, there's one more part. Can you indicate exactly what orders are affecting O1 visas?
Yeah. Okay. So really, there aren't orders impacting O1 visas now. So because, like I said, what may impact O1 visas is whether the culture within USCIS requires the officers to kind of look at the cases with more scrutiny. So that's not a written order. That's just something that we see that happens sometimes in various case types. In the premium processing, we are seeing more requests. But so I think that if there's some internal directive within USCIS to apply more scrutiny to cases, that it would impact cases that are already filed as well. It's because it's, the day they make that statement, every case the adjudicating officers pick up to actually look at is going to be subject to that stricter scrutiny. So I think it would apply to cases that are already filed and pending.
Okay, so I'll do 2 more,
Okay.
you want to stop now?
We can do
Okay, 2
more.
more. Okay. So Juliet asks, I'm wondering if there is a difference regarding restrictions if I'm from Hong Kong, given the recent stricter scrutiny from visa applications from China.
So generally, for immigration purposes, citizens of Hong Kong are considered to be separate from citizens of China, as are citizens of Taiwan. They're considered separately for USCIS purposes. Will citizens of Hong Kong and China be subject to additional screening? So for China, I think it's likely. There haven't been any specific announcements that are, focused exclusively on security measures for China. So we talked about several times, there will be new screening for students around the world. Will there be even more additional screening for students from China? We don't know yet. Just last week or the week before, Marco Rubio made a statement that they are going to be looking more closely at Chinese students for national security reasons. I believe actually it was saying it was ties to the Communist Party. So this is a question that we don't know. We don't know what it's going to look like yet. And we don't know if anything that impacts citizens of mainland China will also impact citizens of Hong Kong. It's too early to say.
All right. So Yagit, I see your question. I can email you separately to answer that. Queenie asks, hi, I just wanted to bump up my question from above. Are there any precautions I need to keep in mind while traveling internationally with the pending I-485 and an approved I-131?
Okay, so you want to carry your I-485 receipt and your advanced parole travel document along with your valid passport when you're traveling. You might expect to be put into secondary inspection while they verify that your I-485 is still pending. What else? And then just, all the other travel restrictions, the travel warnings we said about making sure that your devices and your socials don't contain problematic content. I would say that those are the things that you should have with you or think about or be prepared for, as you're traveling.
All right. So we'll be wrapping this up now. I see there are a lot more questions coming in. Maybe we'll discuss doing a part 2, or we can try to email you and answer some of your questions, or you can schedule a call for a free consultation.
Okay, yeah, I think if we have enough questions, maybe what we'll do is we'll, we have to stop our live discussion today, but we will continue answering the questions in this format and then post it on our YouTube channel.
Oh, that's good. Okay.
Thank you for joining us for today's live Q&A on Trump-era immigration policy changes. We hope you found the answers helpful and the insights valuable as you plan your next steps. At Global Talent Immigration Law Group, we're committed to helping extraordinary individuals like you navigate U.S. immigration with clarity and confidence. Stay informed, stay prepared, and keep pursuing what's possible. Until next time, take care.
Because I did ignore her the first time. And the reason I ignored you